Armed Services Committee member, Senator Mark Wayne Mullin. Senator, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me on. This isn't Texas.
This is not
looks
Oklahoma.
A little bit different.
It's not Oklahoma.
True. Very true.
No, glad to have you here on the lawn of the Pentagon. This story is incredibly concerning on multiple levels. Many will point to, and they should, the administration, the people around Joe Biden in covering up what we just heard in that tape. We'll also point at the media and say how you participate in covering this up. But I also wonder if Special Counsel Robert Hur had a greater obligation to sound the alarm about Joe Biden.
Well, you got to remember, he actually put it in his report. I mean, when he actually said that he feels like the jury would find him incompetent, essentially, by saying they would see this guy as a failing memory and would take pity on him, which is why they chose not to bring the charges to him. It's interesting, though, the timing of them releasing the cancer, right? I said this while we were talking kind of tongue-in-cheek a while ago, but it seems like since her tapes were released, they were like, hey, wait, maybe a good time to distract the American people and talk about his cancer, because we know that cancer's been there for a while. And then when you start talking about the tapes themselves, I think as a special counsel, he went as far as he could. But then you had the left media that was completely covering it up, and
they attacked Robert Hur.
Of course they did. But you start looking at even Jake Tapper, and who has now wrote a book on this. He wrote a book pretty quick. So that means that they knew this was being covered up for quite some time. And now they're starting to say that he didn't even meet with for the most part, as his cabinet members for the last 2 years. And when he was in office, like a full cabinet meeting because his staff was protecting the president. It brings to the question, who actually was running the country?
For all the campaign talk about defending democracy, that Donald Trump represents a threat to democracy, what is an actual threat to democracy? And I would suggest it is keeping a president in office who is cognitively declined and apparently terminally sick. And this is one of the biggest scandals I can imagine, Senator, over the last half a century. If the cancer diagnosis was put out to garner sympathy or to distract from the mental diminishment, I think it only highlights that all of this was held from the American people.
And Congress. Keep in mind, that's very important. Remember how big of a story it was when Secretary Austin went in for surgery, and even the left was making a big deal that he was basically didn't let Congress know, didn't let the White House know, and that was a 3-day period. You have years. We know at least 2 years, because they've admitted themselves that he didn't meet with the cabinet for 2 years, that his team was keeping him protected. So we know for at least 2 years the duly elected president of the United States, which would have been Biden, I guess, if that's what you're going to say, because he did get somewhat elected. You say, who was the bureaucrat? Who was the unelected official that was running it? That is a major cover-up and a major concern, because who was taking the daily briefings? Who was in there that was actually receiving the briefings at the time, that was making the critical decisions that you and I both know have to be made on a daily, not if an hourly basis? And you got essentially an incoherent president run the United States?
It's incredibly scary. It's incredibly scary for America.
Yes.
All right, we're sitting here on the lawn of the Pentagon. You're a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. This morning, President Trump had a meeting with Vladimir Putin. It said that the call lasted 2 hours, and President Trump suggests this puts them on the path to begin negotiations for peace.
When you have leadership in the White House, and it's led through peace through strength, not peace through appeasement, which is what you had the last 4 years of the Biden administration, you have a world that will respond, and it's taking time to reshape. Zelensky and Putin wanted Trump in the middle of this, not just because he's the deal maker, which he is. I mean, he is the deal maker. He literally wrote the book on it, but because of his leadership, because they know that you can stand by his word. What he says will actually happen, and he's actually smart enough to give them room to maneuver too. I mean, even in his post, he said, "Listen, I can get them at the table." I'm paraphrasing this. I can get them at the table, but ultimately they know details that I'm not even aware of that they're going to have to work out. But they're getting to the table, and who's leading this? It's President Trump. He said in the campaign he wanted to end the bloodshed, and he's the only president that could do it. Let's not forget, though, it would have never happened if he would have won office in 2020.
All right, Senator Mark Wayne Mullin, always great to see you.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it.